Loving Indifference by Zdenko Grekar. Sitting cross-legged on my mat, I observed the retreat's final morning. Around me, 24 people who'd arrived as strangers now shared their deepest truths, faces crumpling, then brightening, then crumpling again. Some people were visibly disturbed, others oddly calm. Jon strummed his guitar in the corner, his fingers finding the same chords we'd sung along last night, that chaotic evening when I'd felt so connected, so certain. My mind raced between wanting to understand and needing to forget. I tried to focus, to calm the storm inside me, but each deep breath only brought back flashes of what I'd saw, what I'd done. I needed to surrender, to let it go. I inhaled deeply, fighting myself with each breath, until the chatter around me faded to background noise. Inside me came a stillness I both craved and distrusted, a serene feeling that felt divine yet dangerous, like anesthesia before necessary pain, a tranquil feeling that neither joy nor rage nor suffering can penetrate. Many would mistake this state for emotional vacancy, emotional death. Yet I was aware of every single emotion in my body, but this time not as an owner of them, but rather as observer. I realized that this profound calm harbors one of humanity's least understood powers, what I call loving indifference. Yet indifference, the very word, makes people uneasy. They recoil from it as though from a cold wind, associating it with callousness or emotional death. And they are right. Subconscious, uncontrolled indifference is a form of apathy, emotional coldness, absence of emotions. Yet if properly cultivated, this state becomes not an absence but a presence, a form of mastery few achieve. Like a sword forged in stillness rather than chaos, true loving indifference cuts through life's illusions without cruelty, and its most refined expression offers something revolutionary, a complete understanding of existence itself, transforming how we experience everything from our deepest love to our most profound sufferings. Throughout history, loving indifference has provoked unease precisely because it exists beyond society's mechanisms of influence. Your love can be exploited, your rage channeled, your terror weaponized, your anger controlled by others. But loving indifference, it remains untouchable. To cultivate loving indifference is to become a variable outside the equation, moving through the world unbound by anticipated reactions. You cease functioning as an emotional instrument to be played by others, and this autonomy disturbs those whose power depends on predictable responses and emotional leverage. From infancy, we learn the choreography of reaction, the cry that brings comfort, the smile that earns approval, the argument that defends our territory, the compliance that brings inclusion. Yet what happens when this dance stops? When the music of society's expectations continues, but you no longer feel compelled to move to it? This is where loving indifference blooms, not as barren ground, but as fertile soil for authentic divine self. Loving indifference is like holding grief in your hands without becoming grief itself. It is hearing no without becoming diminished. It is embracing love without dissolving your boundaries. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche, standing at the edge of an alpine precipice, when he said, "The higher man is distinguished from the lower by his fearlessness and his readiness to challenge misfortune." While others might retreat in terror, he remains unmoved, even exhilarated. His concept of the higher man embodies loving indifference, one who faces life's tragedies without flinching, who transforms potential drowning into transcendent swimming. Subconscious indifference equates with coldness, lack of empathy. Loving indifference enables the purest compassion. When your kindness springs from emotional entanglement, it becomes fragile, conditional. When it emerges from a clear, unattached mind, it becomes unshakable, a lighthouse rather than a wave. Consider your own life. How often has your suffering stemmed not from events themselves, but from your reaction to them? How many sleepless nights have you endured over matters that ultimately deserved none of your precious focus and energy? The practice of loving indifference represents the wisdom of preserving your innermost self from that which lies beyond your control. Unfortunately, our culture perpetuates the notion that non-reaction signals apathy, that absence of pursuit indicates lack of passion, that silence is weakness, that not joining screaming crowds points to lack of morals. In reality, profound strength resides in stillness, in our capacity to remain centered when faced with disturbances unworthy of disrupting our equilibrium. Look at the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, undisturbed by temptation, insult, and illusion. His silence was not an ignorance but enlightenment. His equanimity toward praise and criticism wasn't arrogance but mastery. Embracing loving indifference means liberating yourself from manipulation by desire, fear, anger, and external validation. Nevertheless, a paradox emerges. Indifference holds equal potential for destruction and healing. Applied unconsciously, it becomes armor against vulnerability, an escape from relationships, a pathway toward emotional death. Applied consciously, it forms the bedrock of authentic power. And then an essential question emerges. What distinguishes toxic indifference from its liberating counterpart? How do we differentiate between emotional numbness and genuine inner peace? This distinction marks the true awakening. In today's society, headlines are engineered to create fear. Political speeches are aimed to inflame. Social platforms are designed to breed comparison. Relationships are constructed on emotional hostage-taking, where one's tranquility becomes contingent on another's validation. Within such society, loving indifference represents heresy. The moment you cease reacting, you effectively withdraw from the prescribed game, authoring your own existence instead. This mastery of self becomes the ultimate liberation, ultimate awakening. Consider a relationship where your partner threatens to leave during every argument. Most would panic, plead, or promise anything to prevent abandonment. But what if you simply nodded and said, "I understand if you need to go"? Not as manipulation, but as truth. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You've placed your center within yourself rather than another person. This is loving indifference, sitting with an unreturned text without spiraling into narratives of rejection, maintaining your joy despite someone else's mood, forgive without seeking reconciliation, loving completely without need of justification. True independence isn't loudly declaring, "I'm better alone." It's the quiet certainty that remains when the room empties. Such sovereignty allows you to close chapters without bitterness, to wish well those who wounded you without needing their apology, to lose treasured things while preserving your essential self. Circumstances matter less than our response to them. Developing this capacity requires the death of something familiar, that hungry ghost within that constantly seeks external validation, transforming every rejection into evidence of your unworthiness. It requires your ego to die. To cultivate loving indifference, we must understand that most human behavior is driven by our own wounds, our own fears, and our own projections. Loving indifference must be born from consciousness, not bitterness or self-defense. The wounded heart often mistakes emotional armor for enlightenment. Behind that facade of "I don't care anymore" lies not transcendence, but a frozen landscape where nothing grows. Real loving indifference stands not as the absence of feeling, but as a mastery of it. Not as a fortress we built to keep pain away, but as a clearing from which you can witness all of life's weather without becoming the storm itself. Embracing conscious, loving indifference demands raw courage. You must release your grip on what others think of you, on desired outcomes, on the need to prove yourself right. This isn't rejecting feelings, but surrendering the ego that clings to them. When you no longer hunger for external validation, reactivity falls away. A profound shift occurs. You walk through the world with a steady presence, unshaken by storms around you. Like water in a mountain pool, you reflect the tumult above while maintaining perfect stillness in your depths. Between trigger and response, there is a space. When you practice loving indifference, this sacred pause between event and emotion becomes your dwelling place. Inhabit this space fully, and external circumstances lose their dominion over you. The tyranny of reactive feelings, judgments of others, and desired results dissolves. You enter existence from its foundation, pure consciousness rather than conditioned response. You enter loving indifference. Modern psychologists might call it emotional regulation, fully inhabiting your feelings without being consumed by them. The Stoics named this state apatheia, the soul's sovereignty over passion rather than its absence. In Buddhism, it manifests as upekkha, that perfect equilibrium where the mind remains unshaken by life's turbulence. Though separated by millennia and continents, these wisdom traditions converge on a single revelation. True liberation dawns in that sacred pause between trigger and response. Picture yourself across from someone whose every word seems designed to wound you. Your body tenses, heart races, words of defense rise to your lips. The moment you engage in this battle, you've already surrendered something precious, your peace. True power lies not in reaction, but in conscious non-engagement, not cold withdrawal, but a centered presence that observes without absorption. When their storms no longer create triggers within you, you've discovered the quiet authority that no external force can diminish. Practice loving indifference and watch as the hooks of manipulation find no purchase in your being. The currency of emotional blackmail, those subtle threats and implied consequences, suddenly becomes worthless. The familiar weights of guilt, shame, and fear slide off you like water from polished stone. Those who have built their power on your reactions will stand bewildered before your stillness, eventually withdrawing to seek easier targets for their control. When you embrace loving indifference, you transform not just external relationships, but your relationship with yourself. You begin to observe your flaws with the same gentle detachment you offer others. The voice that once dissected every mistake grows quieter. You recognize self-criticism as the ego positioning itself at the center of your universe. As this softens, personal growth unfolds naturally, without the familiar cycle of shame and punishment. Consider those around you who drain their energy managing others' perceptions. Their existence becomes performance art, each social media post calculated, each conversation strategically navigated. Yet perception remains fundamentally uncontrollable. Others will always interpret you through their own experiential filters. To release this need for approval is to discover true liberation. Your aim shifts from being admired to being authentic. This newfound freedom appears in quiet moments, speaking with precision rather than excess, departing from pointless arguments without needing the last word, allowing misunderstandings to exist without immediate correction. The truly sovereign spirit no longer sacrifices inner calm for external validation. And the best part? Suffering transforms when we surrender our rebellion against it. The moment we release our grip on the belief that emotional or physical pain is unnatural, we discover a profound peace. Life's full spectrum, its radiance and shadows, its flowering and withering, becomes not just acceptable but necessary. Our resistance, not the pain itself, creates our deepest anguish. As Nietzsche understood, suffering is inevitable. Finding meaning within it is our choice. This loving indifference doesn't numb us to life's wounds. Rather, it allows us to stand steady within the storm, mining wisdom from what once would have destroyed us. Imagine a version of yourself who no longer surrenders energy to things of no consequence. What emerges when you cease responding to each critique, letdown, or moment of doubt? Not a fortress walls you were building before awakening, but a being anchored in profound internal silence, unassailable because you've located the wellspring of serenity within. When you cultivate loving indifference, resistance dissolves into a profound peace. Rather than retreating from experience, you embrace life's fleeting nature as something precious. Laughter, love, tears, Sadness, loss, and even anger will flow through you while a steady awareness remains. Your essential self stands untouched by circumstance. Eventually, you recognize that even your darkest moments serve the mysterious process of your becoming. The path toward loving indifference requires extraordinary courage, a willingness to release your grasp on everything familiar, your sense of self, your illusion of control, even the meanings you've assigned to your life. Few choose this journey precisely because it demands complete surrender before revealing wholeness. Your ego, sensing its own dissolution, will mount desperate resistance. It will whisper that abandoning its protection means sacrificing your essential qualities, your personality, your uniqueness, your very humanity. Yet what dissolves are merely the constructs that have confined you. As you shed the compulsion to prove yourself right, to secure approval, to validate your existence, what emerges is consciousness in its purest form, unbound. Within this spaciousness, love transforms. No longer a transaction or possession, it expands into limitless compassion, freed from the confines of the small self. Fear falls away from your loving. The impulse to possess dissolves. You give simply because generosity flows naturally. You forgive because you recognize that forgiveness liberates you. Living in loving indifference transforms your existence. The desperate cycle of pursuit and avoidance dissolves. Resistance to reality falls away. You enter the current of life's natural flow. Action without strain, creation without force, connection without possession. Rather than demanding reality conform to your vision, you become the vessel through which life itself moves. This isn't withdrawal, it's alignment. Your engagement with the world deepens immeasurably, rooted in completeness rather than lack. Witnessing suffering awakens your compassion without dragging you into despair's undertow. Uncertainty no longer paralyzes you because you have recognized the fundamental truth. What genuinely belongs to your essence cannot be lost, and what doesn't will inevitably pass. When chaos encircles you, when discord and conflict press in, remember, reaction is optional. Not every challenge requires engagement. Not every assertion demands rebuttal. You can retreat into the space between trigger and response, breathe, and choose loving indifference.